can't believe that it's already time to say goodbye to 2024, but I'm excited to share with you what we felt were our favorites for every month out of the year. We are starting off in January, and around here, right after the holidays, is right when we just start getting sick. And everybody is coughing and sneezing and having the sniffles. And on this particular January day, we were needing some chicken noodle soup. So I was heating up some butter and chopping up some onions and celery. I added in a big scoopful of garlic and got that sauteing in the butter. I then added in some peas and carrots that I always keep in my freezer just to have on hand for quick recipes like these. For this pot of soup, I am adding some turmeric, some oregano, some rosemary, and some thyme. I feel like you can change up your soup in so many different ways just based on the seasonings and the herbs that you use. I already had some chicken breast cooked up from another meal, so I grabbed 2 of those and cut them up into bite-sized pieces and then added them right into the pot. Next, I covered everything with some water. I added some chicken bouillon powder. Once the simmering liquid was about to come to a boil, I just poured in some egg noodles.
Audition.
Audition?
Yeah.
You got the part. It's a done deal.
You laughing at me?
Is it good? What does it need? It needs something.
A bigger bowl.
Now, going into February, the month of love, it was my first time making Mississippi pot roast, and I actually did fall in love with it. On the day that I was making this recipe, it was family dinner day, and I just made it on a massive size. I mean, just like tripled it. I just seasoned up my meat with garlic powder, salt, and pepper. And then once it was partially cooked, I added some potatoes. I used the au jus and brown gravy packets as well as the ranch seasoning packets. And I also added a stick of butter, some pepperoncini juice, and some of the peppers as well, just like the traditional recipe. And it was a big hit with the whole family. My favorite recipe for March ended up being the time that I got the wrong order from Walmart, and I just made a meal out of it. So what happened was the weather was really bad, and I received someone else's order, and it was just enough food to make one meal. And what it looked like to me was that they planned to make potato soup using hash browns. I received a couple of different cream cheeses. I decided to use the garden vegetable. There was some whole kernel corn, which I didn't use because I know my family doesn't like corn in their potato soup. Some cream of chicken, some instant mashed potatoes, a package of diced ham, some chicken broth, and some bacon pieces, which I also didn't use, but I also received a loaf of bread, so I thought this would make some soup. I just put the potatoes and a chopped up onion, the diced ham, and some chopped up celery. The onion and the celery I already had on hand. I added some chicken broth to the crock pot as well. I used half of the container of the Garden Medley cream cheese spread. And this is just so funny to me because it has now become our go-to recipe for a really quick and easy potato soup. My husband really liked this a lot, and it's so easy that I just can't not make it. It's so easy to throw together in the crock pot. I added some milk as well just to give it an extra creamy texture, added some salt and some pepper. And I also added some garlic to this as well. Put the lid on and let it go. And like I said, I have made this several times since then. It is our new favorite way to make the quickest and easiest potato soup ever. I topped mine with some real bacon pieces, which I had on hand, and also some cheese. And of course, we had some of that yummy bread with it. I made a lot of food in April, but I also made goulash, so it has to be showcased as one of our favorites. Now, I know that there are many different ways to make goulash, and this is just how I do it. I start by getting some onions and some green bell peppers chopped up, and then I will add them into a pot with some ground beef. My favorite thing about goulash is that I can make it all in one pot. I also love how it feeds a crowd and gives you leftovers. I often refer to goulash as poor people's food because it's gotten me through some hard times. It's a great way to stretch a pound of ground beef. I just season it up with some salt and some pepper and some garlic. If I'm cooking for older people, I will add some crushed red pepper. We like the spice, but if I'm feeding little ones, I skip that part. We also like a little bit of brown sugar. It plays really well with those spicy crushed red peppers. And then I'm going to add a can of petite diced tomatoes. I'll use Rotel if I have it. And anytime I have a little bit of salsa in my fridge, I add it to a dish like this, just to use it up. I will then use that jar from the salsa to add some water into the pot because you want to have some liquid to cook your elbow macaroni in. I bring the simmering liquid up to a boil before I add my elbow macaroni. You want to make sure that it's good and hot and boiling so that the macaroni doesn't turn gummy. Goulash always tastes better after you turn it down and let it sit, but I never have the patience for that. Usually by the time May gets here, I am ready to put the garden in, but I think I had to wait till June this year because our weather was so weird and we were still eating warm and cozy comfort foods in May. But for this one, I just used some frozen meatballs, which I added a packet of brown gravy and a can of French onion soup. I lost some footage, so I just kind of pasted on a picture of it for you. And then once they were all cooked, I just added some mozzarella cheese, plopped them back in, whipped up some instant mashed potatoes, and I'm convinced that my grandma's instant mashed potatoes were so good because she added so much butter to them, and I made them just the way that she would, and I was definitely right about that one. And these meatballs turned out really good and became a quick family favorite. Just like any other American family, spaghetti and garlic bread is in our rotation a lot. But this particular time that I made spaghetti, my husband just went on and on and on about it because I didn't use jarred sauce. I used these packets of zesty, thick and zesty spaghetti sauce. And I also browned up some sausage and some ground beef. together. And then I added a little bit of chopped up onion. And you know me, I was using things I had on hand. So it was like leftover ground beef, leftover onion, some garlic, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That's just how I do it. I added a can of Rotel and just made sure everything was mixed in really good. And once those onions were cooked to a soft state, then I added a couple of spoonfuls of tomato paste. I added some water, just like the package directions called for. And then I just sprinkled in those spaghetti sauce packets. And these are a whole different texture, and we really did like it. A lot of the jar sauce just, they come on too strong. You know what I mean? So this just kind of feels like a little bit of a more um, fresh taste, just a different version. So I just cooked up my spaghetti noodles in a separate pot. We always add our noodles right in with our sauce just to keep everything nice and from sticking together. It's just the way we like it. That's how we do it. I just sprinkled in some Parmesan cheese just to make it nice and cheesy. Super simple, but really, really delicious. It's a big hit every single time I make it. And then I just always will put a little bit of cottage cheese on the side and some garlic bread. And we do have spaghetti quite regularly, and this is how we make it now ever since. I do want to showcase that this was the month that we got our chickens and added our little furry friends. We also lost our dog Champ, and spring was in full bloom, and then bam, it was summer. It seems like we only get like one good week in between the cold and the hot. But this year in July, we celebrated my birthday on the 4th of July by going to Niagara Falls. That was really fun. And as far as dinners, it was just a really busy time. I don't think I really actually cooked a lot. But we did make some of these, I guess I'm going to call them wet burritos. But the one thing I want to point out that was different about this year was that we got air conditioning in our main floor. So that is why I was able to use my oven in July. So I was super happy about that. All I did was roll up some taco meat with some cheese and put it in a dish with some enchilada sauce. Now, sometimes I do make my own chili gravy, but I think on this day I just used the canned stuff just to make it even easier. And so I just baked those until the tortillas and the cheese were nice and crispy, and then just dish them up and set out some toppings. And I am just using some shredded lettuce and some salsa on mine. I'm not very fancy. I keep it real simple. Now, I believe I have seen this labeled as enchiladas on Pinterest, and I've also seen it as burritos. Somebody who knows better will tell you, I'm sure, but I don't care. It's just a meal that my family really enjoys a lot. Some of our best memories are our family camping trips of when our kids were growing up, and we, over the past few years, have made it a tradition for us all to get together in one big group and go camping. And that requires tent camping most of the time, but it always ends up being tons and tons of food because we have such a large family. But it is so fun for me to cook with all of my kids again. I remember the days when they would be just hovering around or running through the kitchen, and it was always so hectic and chaotic, but I truly love being able to cook with them. And I also discovered that my new favorite way to make taco meat is on my Blackstone griddle. It is so super easy. You just brown up your meat and let the grease roll right out of that hole in the back. Just sprinkle on your seasoning mixes, and because we didn't have running water, we used bottled water to moisten up the taco seasoning, and voila, it is done. It's so super easy. It tastes so good, and you just make your walking tacos. And yes, I know I opened my bag on the wrong end. It was just a habit to open it like that, but it worked anyway, and we all had such a good time camping in August. I have to admit that September came in like a hurricane, and with me just being grandma on the sidelines of all these events and sports that the grandkids were in, I can just imagine how their parents felt. I think September is when we all start getting super excited about using our crock pots again. Well, I use my crock pot all year long, but I think we start looking forward to the fall foods, and chili is one of those foods that I lean on during fall, especially when I have to be at a game and want to have something good to come home to. And Bill told me that this was the absolute best chili that I've ever made. So I need to make it like this every single time. And I've had to refer to this video several times since then to make sure that I get it right. But I added my ground beef, some tomatoes, some onions, some garlic, some chili powder, some paprika, some cumin, some slap ya mama, and some beans. And of course, some crushed red pepper flakes. I just mix it all together. I like to do all of this first before adding any liquid. We want it to be really nice and chunky. I add some beef bouillon powder, and then I start adding liquid a little bit at a time because we like our chili to be really thick and hearty. And because it was September, I still had a lot of fresh produce in my garden. I had some jalapeno peppers as well as some tomatoes that were still coming in really nice. So I just grabbed some of those jalapenos, brought them back in, and chopped them up and added those into our pot of chili. Now we like our food a little bit on the spicy side. I don't like anything as hot as my husband, but I do like jalapenos, and so this is what that chili was like when it was all done. And like I said, I've had to come back and find this video because I swear I never make chili the same way twice. And this is how the family has been requesting it lately, which I can't blame them. It was very good. Chili is one of our favorite fall foods. And with that being said, we are going into Halloween, which is my personal favorite because I love Halloween. I meant we are going into October. But I am so happy that we get to celebrate Octobers. But one of my favorite foods for this October was this creepy pizza that I made using a frozen pizza. Anytime I make homemade pizza, I like to use one of these Jack's pizza. Basically, I take everything off of it, which is just the pepperoni, and then add extra cheese, add the pepperoni plus more pepperoni back on, and then whatever toppings that I like. But because this is Halloween, I am going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to use some mushrooms to make some skulls, and to do that, I just used a straw and popped the eyes out, and then used a knife to make some teeth. I added some onions, and then I used some black olives to make some creepy spiders. The kids had a lot of fun helping me make these. Of course, they are not going to eat this because it is not very kid friendly. Most kids don't like tomato or mushrooms and olives and onions, but not only was this pizza creepy, I thought it tasted delicious, and I am kind of a pizza snob and really like this one. It was so tasty and good. So definitely a grown-up pizza, but the kids sure did have fun making it. Now, my husband really liked this pizza as well, but he had his own opinion on what his favorite food was for October. It was a lasagna that I made, and he just absolutely loved it. I browned up a pound of sausage and a half pound of ground beef. I added a little bit of salsa I had in the fridge. I think I've mentioned that I like to use it up when I can. A can of tomatoes and 2 packs of zesty spaghetti sauce mix. I did not add any tomato paste this time. I added some water, some brown sugar, some crushed red pepper flakes, some beef bouillon granules, and some garlic. And I added enough water to make it nice and runny. I did that on purpose because I wanted those noodles to have some liquid to soak up. And you can do this with regular noodles, but you can also use oven ready noodles, which is what I had on hand. So that's what I was using. But like I said, you can use regular old lasagna noodles if you want. The key is just to have enough liquid in your casserole dish and to make sure that you put some foil or something on top to cover it tightly when you bake it. And that will trap the steam in there and make sure that those noodles get cooked all the way through. I just continued with layering on that meat sauce and the noodles with some cheese. And for the middle layer, I usually will use sliced provolone cheese. It's just something that when my kids were growing up, somebody, one or two of them, I had a lot of kids, there was always a couple who complained about ricotta or cottage cheese in the lasagna. So I would just always serve it on the side and make a nice cheesy layer with some sliced cheese in the middle. And when I'm all done adding that last layer of meat sauce, I don't put the cheese on because I want to cover it with foil and bake it until those noodles are nice and tender. I do add some cheese, pop it back in, and this is what it looks like when it comes out. This was so good. So, so good. And my husband's favorite lasagna. Now, November came and had such an attitude, but I just want to show you guys my turkey because I am generally not a big fan of turkey, but this year's Thanksgiving turkey was really good to me. I mean, I think I may have single-handedly ate all the leftovers over the week after Thanksgiving, but I know this part isn't really fun to watch, but preparing a turkey is not glamorous. It is pretty gross. And I know my green fingernail polish isn't helping the situation, but it is work. It really is. But just make sure you're washing your hands a lot. And what I did was just loosen up that skin, and then I put pats of butter underneath the skin. Now, I've watched a lot of the Food Network channel, and I've seen many chefs make turkeys many different ways. And I've taken a little bit here and a little bit there from each one. And of course, you can whip up your butter with some herbs or whatever you want and put it under the skin like some do, but I like to do a little variation where the butter goes under the skin and do like a dry rub on top of the skin. Now, I ripped my skin, but that's okay because my husband steals the skin anyway. And you don't really have to pat it down because it's all going to melt and just kind of ooze and run around anyway. But that will keep your turkey breast nice and juicy. So in a separate measuring cup, I am just putting together a rub. I started off with some seasoned salt, and I'm just going by intuition here. Some people say measure with your heart. I don't know. I just let the voices in my head tell me how much to add, and usually things turn out pretty good. So I did a little bit of garlic powder and some onion powder, some black pepper. I'm also going to add a little bit of sage, and I tend to think like a little sage goes a long way, but add as much as you like of everything. I added some thyme, and then I also added some rosemary. Now, I usually take my rosemary and just kind of smash it up with my fingers just because it's such big, hard, like woodsy pieces, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, it just kind of helps to crush it up, or you can take um a mortar and I can't even think of what it's called, but anyway, you can crush it all up. And so I just use my measuring spoon, mix it all around, and this is going to make a lot. And I just start off by just sprinkling it on, and then eventually end up pouring it because it's all going to get like a little massage anyway. I'm going to rub it in, and I always like to make sure that I'm using herbs and spices that I want to be in my gravy because these are basically going to run off into your turkey drippings and flavor that up. And then if you're like me and you use your turkey drippings to make gravy, then that's what your gravy is going to taste like. So just use what you like. And that's all that I do. And if I had different spices on hand, I may use those. Who knows? I kind of cook the way I feel at the time. And usually it turns out pretty good. And like I said, I think that this was one of the best turkeys that I've made in a super long time. And I ate a lot of turkey, and I don't usually do that. And I have this turkey on a rack in a turkey roaster just because I knew that I would need my oven freed up for other dishes, and it usually turns out really good. I just went ahead and removed the turkey timer, you know, the little red pop-up thing that comes in it. I just took that right out and just used my own meat thermometer and just made sure that my turkey was cooked all the way through. And this is how it turned out, and Bill had already come and collected his turkey skin tax. But this turkey, like I said, was so juicy and tender that it made the favorites. And so November was a big month for me. I did end up having surgery. Our weather was off and on with the snow. The chickens started laying eggs, which was wonderful since they are now contributing to groceries. And before we knew it, it was December, and December came with a lot of celebrations. And the one meal that I felt made my top favorite was some beef stew that I cooked in my Ninja cooker, which I really like to use a lot because it has a saute mode. And how I get my beef stew started is I put my stew meat on the saute mode and a little bit of olive oil. I sprinkle on some flour, mix it all in, and start browning it. I add some salt and some pepper and some garlic powder as well. And I just brown up that meat, turning it ever so often, just until it's pretty brown on all sides. And then I'll start adding my other ingredients like potatoes or whatever veggies. This time I was using whatever I had on hand in the fridge that needed to be used up. So I added some potatoes, of course, and then I had some white mushrooms that needed to go in as well. So I just chopped those up really roughly. I had some broccoli and carrots that were kind of lurking, so those went into the pot as well. And I like to have a creamy beef stew. I know some people make it kind of on the tomatoey side, but I like it to be more of a beefy and robust flavor. So I added a can of French onion soup, a can of cream of mushroom, and a packet of brown gravy. I then added a soup can of liquid. I just went ahead and used a small amount of liquid because I want it to be very thick and hearty. And so that is basically all there is to my beef stew. I put the lid on and let it cook for most of the day, and then came back later and it was done. We drove down through Indiana and Kentucky to Chattanooga, Tennessee to see the in-laws. We enjoyed getting out of Michigan for a little while. It was 60 degrees on Christmas Day. We had a blast with our other family members while we were down there. And then we headed back the day after Christmas. So it was a really quick trip, but we had so much fun.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot a cup of kindness yet for days.